The Rundown with Carrie Saldo podcast is funded by Armbrook Village Senior Living in Westfield with support services designed to help seniors age in place, including a Compass Memory Support Neighborhood. More at armbrookvillage.com.
This is The Rundown, your weekly news and review from Western Mass. I'm Carrie Saldo. It's Friday, September 5th, 2025. We are back from our summer break, an extended one for me because of a broken wrist, but I am on the mend and delighted to be back. I'm joined today in the studio with our Rundown panel, Eric Lesser, Senior Counsel at WilmerHale, Journalist Emeritus Paul Tuthill, and NEPM News Executive Editor Elizabeth Roman. Welcome and good morning to each of you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Late yesterday, Massachusetts Governor Maura Healey spoke up and spoke out. The headline in the Boston Globe, Massachusetts insurers will cover costs of state-recommended vaccines, according to the governor. The Boston Globe reporters Jason Laughlin and Katrina Schmeiser wrote the piece, quoting here, Massachusetts became the first state in the country Thursday to require insurers to cover the cost of COVID shots and other inoculations recommended by state health officials, in another move to counter the Trump administration's efforts to undo the long national consensus on vaccines. The rift was prompted by new federal limitations on who should receive COVID vaccines under Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. that have created confusion among consumers, pharmacies, and physicians, and made it difficult for even those with demonstrated need to get booster shots. Here's part of what Healey said.
Under the Trump administration, the CDC has been hijacked by people like Robert Kennedy, people who don't believe in science, and people who don't believe in science-based healthcare.
Eric Lesser, people who don't believe in science-based healthcare, the administration has a very different opinion on this, which we'll get into. What's your reaction to Governor Healey's move?
Well, first, I'm grateful to the governor for doing it. It's absolutely the right move, and it's good to see Massachusetts out front. I think that people need to understand kind of what happened here procedurally. The federal government made a series of, fairly alarming personnel decisions at the CDC and also some technical changes to how they provided guidance on vaccines. That had downstream consequences for insurance coverage and, for example, made it hard for people to have their insurance plans cover vaccines that they want and they want to get access to. So the
CVS stepped up and said they weren't even going to distribute the COVID vaccine to Massachusetts prior to Healey's decision.
Exactly. So what the governor did yesterday is not a mandate. It's not going to force any person who doesn't want to take the vaccine to take it. What it's going to say is, if you want it and if you are following the recommendation of your doctor, your insurance will cover it. And part of the result of that is because of the state DPH instruction, the pharmacies now will have to do a better job of stocking it and will have to stock it. So you saw the reaction from CVS. Frankly, this is something that shouldn't even really be taking up bandwidth of state officials' time because it's so obvious. The vaccine policies for decades before this followed the public health guidance, made it available, and had insurance cover it. This is clarifying that would apply to COVID as well.
In response to Healey's decision, HHS spokesperson Andrew Nixon told the Boston Globe, quote, Democrat-run states that pushed unscientific school lockdowns, toddler mask mandates, and draconian vaccine passports during the COVID era completely eroded the American people's trust in public health agencies. He added that HHS is driven by, quote, rigorous evidence and gold standard science. Paul, what are your thoughts?
It's a further divide of the country in red and blue again. Now there's talk that Massachusetts is going to join with some other states in the other New England states, except New Hampshire, where there's a Republican governor, to form a coalition that would establish vaccine policy similar to apparently to what California, Washington, and Oregon announced earlier this week.
Yep.
I think it's further evidence that the Health and Human Services Secretary, Mr. Kennedy, was disingenuous in his confirmation hearings when he said he wouldn't block anyone from getting a vaccine if they wanted it. Clearly, they've taken steps that are intended to block people from getting vaccines, even if they want it, as what we've seen here in Massachusetts when you couldn't get a COVID booster at a CVS because they weren't stocking them. I get I'm a CVS pharmacy customer. I get texts from them all the time. And every fall, they text me saying, it's time to schedule your vaccine appointments. Well, the only vaccine appointment you could schedule was for the flu.
Yeah. Big differences here. Paul, the coalition that you mentioned really caught my eye because when I heard Healy made this move, I immediately thought about, okay, but what happens when someone from Vermont comes into Massachusetts? So this coalition idea, I think...
Vermont would be okay.
Yeah, right.
Maybe not New Hampshire.
They're a Democratic state.
New Hampshire,
Well, they said that New Hampshire would not be included, apparently because Governor Ayotte, who's a Republican, isn't interested in doing
But
this.
there's this popcorn effect that we're seeing, right? Florida has decided, we heard at the top of the hour news, Florida is going it alone and is going to do away with any mandatory childhood vaccinations. Liz?
I'm actually curious if it'll increase rates in Massachusetts because Karen Brown out of the NEPM newsroom last week wrote a story about how vaccination rates for children going into schools has lowered quite a bit. So 10% of kids in Franklin County are entering school without the recommended vaccines, followed by 9% in Berkshire and 6% in Hampden County. So I'm curious if this state push to try and get vaccinations going again will lead to an increase in the region overall.
I think it's also important to just have clarity about really what's happening here and what the stakes are. The country should and has and should continue to have a conversation about the impact of the school closures and maybe some of the excess of the COVID era policies. That is a very different conversation and is a very different policy question than whether or not insurance is going to cover people who want to take the vaccine and who are being recommended by their doctor to take the vaccine. There's confusion happening in a smokescreen because the overreaction to some of what maybe happened during the COVID era is creating a backtracking that has no precedent in really modern medicine. Again, what the state did yesterday was say insurance has to cover a preventative measure just like it covers other vaccines and always has, and that the CVS and the other pharmacies have to stock it. That is a different item than the debate that we should have about school closures and the impact on mental health. Those are really different things, and we need our leaders to clarify that for the public.
And also there's still so much misinformation and wingnut conspiracy theories out there about the COVID vaccine. Operation Warp Speed, which began under the Trump administration, that produced the vaccine that ended the COVID epidemic, was a Nobel Prize worthy effort. But now Trump has completely walked away from it for, I guess, he's done it for political reasons.
Great context there, Paul. I really appreciate it. The insurance companies, for their part, told the Boston Globe the Massachusetts Association of Health Plans, the trade group representing health insurers, they expressed support for Governor Healy's move here. But I still think it'll be interesting to watch whether, and I was on Truth Social right before we went online, so I don't know if President Trump has said something since. If it'll be interesting to see if he begins to push back, saying, insurers, Massachusetts has made this move, Vermont has made this move. Don't fall in line. Listen to what I am saying. So I'll be interested to see if the president pressures insurance companies now, since Governor Healy is saying, well, you made this choice. Massachusetts is making the following choice as a result. All right, I'm going to move us on. It was Labor Day on Monday, the national holiday meant to honor the American worker and the rights they've secured. Headline, workers over billionaires. Hundreds gather in Pittsfield to support the labor movement. This is by reporter Talia Lesueur. Shouting chants and waving signs, about 200 people filled Center Street outside the Silvio Conti Federal Building on Labor Day to protest federal actions they say endanger workers and widen the wealth gap. It was one of 3 gatherings in Berkshire County and hundreds nationwide rallying in support of the working class while opposing the widening wealth gap, federal cuts to Social Security and Medicare, restrictions on voting access, changes to the Department of Education, immigration policies, and rising food and housing costs. Thoughts on these protests, Paul Tuthill?
Well, for decades, the Labor Day breakfast was a fixture on the local political calendar.
We
I'm
joked-
sure
Senator Lesser,
We
former
joked
Senator Lesser.
it would end with lunch.
I'm sure you attended more than one of them, as I did as well. But these gatherings were kind of private affairs. I mean, you had to be invited, you had to pay to get in. This year, the city of Boston had a Labor Day parade as opposed to a Labor Day breakfast, and something that was far more inclusive and public, obviously, and that's the case with the events that were held out in the Berkshires. So I think the message is the same, but it's just going to reach more people than the old-fashioned Labor Day breakfasts.
Liz, Phil Bishop for NEPM was in Holyoke, right?
Yeah, he was, and I think I've covered a lot of Labor Day events in my career. Over 20 years of going to Labor Day events and working Labor Day, by the way. And I think what's different now is that it's not so much focus on just workers' rights, right? We're not just talking about livable wage. We're not just talking about benefits in the workplace. We're talking about human rights. We're talking about immigration. We're talking about housing. We're talking about rights for the queer LGBTQ community. So it's expanded beyond that because people, I think, are feeling really desperate. They're feeling like, your quality of life is impacted if you don't have proper housing. It's difficult, or transportation. It's difficult for you to get to work, to go and fight for benefits that you need at your job. So I think that's what's been interesting to me, to see that shift. And Phil talked to a lot of people that were very focused on immigration rights and really concerned about, people losing their licensures or like their certifications to be able to work based on what's going on in the federal government. So for me, that's been a shift that's been notable.
Eric Lesser, we know where you weren't on Monday. What's your reaction to all of this?
So, well, I think that it raises an interesting question to kind of build off of Liz's point about, the changes that are happening in the American labor movement, and certainly Western Mass is no exception. And some of this is the changes in our economy. You've seen, for example, some recent organizing efforts at places like Amazon and Starbucks, which had historically been very anti-union, and there's been some recent successes there. You've also seen organizing efforts at UPS. You've seen a fracturing among some unions with the traditional lockstep support for Democrats. I thought it was notable that Sean O'Brien, who's from Boston, the head of the National Teamsters Union, spoke and was welcomed at the Republican National Convention in 2024. You saw some tension with the UAW in Michigan with the Biden administration over the electric vehicle mandates, for example. So there's a lot happening in the space, and I think at the core of it is the economy has changed in ways that are very profound and unsettling for people. You now have AI coming on board. You've got continued issues with inflation. Cost of healthcare continues to go up. So I think you're going to see a lot of changes and a lot of activity in the space for the foreseeable future.
And again, these events in Western Mass and across the country on Monday, huge schism between what the people are saying and what the president is saying. The president, the White House had headlines, "No administration has fought harder for the American worker." President Trump is delivering for American workers. These are just a couple of headlines that were on White House press releases that were put out this week. Among the benefits that the Trump administration touted, his trade deals. They're, quote, leveling the playing field for the American worker after decades of being sold out for cheap foreign labor. So obviously, very, very different opinions on this issue. We'll continue to talk about it here on The Rundown. We are going to take a quick break. Our Rundown panel ahead will talk about the new state ban on so-called junk fees and a tale of two invasive species here in the Bay State, plus Scoop's brazen prediction. From our panel, you're listening to The Rundown here on 88.5 NEPM. I'm Carrie Saldo. Stay with us. Welcome back to The Rundown here on 88.5 NEPM. I am Carrie Saldo, joined by Eric Lesser, Senior Counsel at Wilmer-Hale and former state senator from the 413, former journalist Paul Tudhill, retired, and NEPM News Executive Editor Elizabeth Roman. We are back to talk about something out of the Berkshire Eagle that impacted the state this week. The Bay State's new ban on junk fees officially took effect on Tuesday. The Berkshire Eagle's Mary Jane Williams reporting, a new state ban on junk fees requires businesses to disclose the full price of goods and services up front, including all those hidden fees. The Attorney General's office defines junk fees as, quote, hidden, surprise, or unnecessary costs that increase the total price of a product beyond the advertised price. But any consumer, I'm sure, can immediately recognize these fees. It's, when you go to book concert tickets, it's when you go to book a hotel room, and it's going to be $100, and then all of a sudden you're like, how did I end up at $185? It's all of these different charges, right? And they're only revealed typically at the end of the transactions. Under these new rules that took effect this week, the advertised price has to match the total price a consumer pays at the checkout, and the invoices must be itemized with clear disclosure of optional or waivable charges. And this is the big one for me: instructions on how to opt out.
Yes.
Amen.
I have burned so many hours in my life that I want back, opting out of stuff that is just like, here, dig through this and click on this page. And it's just maddening. And then I think about people like my grandparents who maybe aren't as tech savvy as I may or may not be, who don't have the same wherewithal to sort of opt out of these things. It's really problematic. All right, folks, had we come to accept junk fees as a way of life, or thoughts on these changes?
I don't know. I didn't accept it. I was always complaining about it. So I think as a consumer and as a journalist, I think this is a great thing, right? Because transparency as a journalist, like I think people should know what they're getting into. I know what they should know what they're paying for. As an avid consumer of many things, I'm excited to see that fee is going to be there in the beginning, just so that you know what you're working with, right? I mean, I'm still going to buy the concert tickets. I'm still going to do the Airbnb, whatever. It's not like I stopped doing those things. I think companies banked on the fact that you got so far into the ordering process that by the time you saw that it was 3 additional fees, like, do you want to go back and look for a better deal, or are you just going to pay the fees and move on? So
maybe I'm too cheap. I have definitely bailed on. I got into the finish line and saw additional fees and bailed. How about you guys?
That's why they hid them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
well, exactly right. I mean, for one of the things that it did, one of the things that this ban on junk fees is intended to do is to make comparison shopping easier, so you can look at what the upfront price is and what the bottom line is, and compare everything accordingly, as you would with any other shopping situation. There is in reading through some of this, I did discover there is kind of a gray area, and it has to do with restaurants and how they have to put their prices on their menu. Restaurants are allowed to charge a fee for a large party, so long as they indicate on the restaurant's menu or its advertisements that they're putting in, say, a 20% service
there's
charge
8 of you
on your
instead
total
of
bill.
2.
However, the regulations do not define what a large party is. So one restaurant may say 8 people is a large party. Another restaurant may say, it's 10
6. Yeah,
or
who
6.
knows?
Exactly. So that's one little area. I don't expect that's going to blow up into a big deal like, the Ticketmaster situations, but
as a former longtime server, waitress, I will say 6 and more. That is a big party. That's a lot of personalities.
That's a lot of plates.
It
I'm
is.
curious how it's going to be monitored. Like, who's going to be watching to make sure, especially with the bigger, obviously the mom and pops are probably going to comply, but what about bigger companies that are not based in Massachusetts? How are they doing that?
There's also federal rules regarding hidden fees as well. But as I understand it, in Massachusetts, you could file a complaint with the Attorney General's office, or you could go to small claims court yourself.
So it's the onus is on the people. So you have to go and say, oh, I got charged this fee, and then you call consumer protections, or is that how it's going to work?
It'll fall under Chapter 93A, which is the state's consumer protection law, which is the same consumer law that you would use for price gouging and for other kind of consumer oriented. But the short answer is yes. There would have to be some sort of notice of and enforcement through the AG's office. But kudos to the Attorney General, to Andrea Campbell for doing this.
Agreed.
It's clearly very popular. Just for a touch of background, this had been a major priority of the Biden administration. It was a headline focus of Lena Khan at the FTC. It was also a major focus of the CFPB under Rohit Chopra. People remember the uproar over the Taylor Swift concert ticket charges through Ticketmaster. That was one of the kind of instigators of all of this. Interestingly, on the politics, the CFPB, of course, has effectively been dismantled now under the Trump administration. So those junk fee rules are not happening. The FTC era rules seem to be continuing. At least there's an indication that they'll, in some form, be continuing in the Trump administration. There are gaps because this is a purely state action. A lot of Democratic AGs are stepping up to fill in what's been left on the kind of chopping room floor. A big example is that the states do not have the authority to regulate airline prices, for example, and a big source of frustration people have is booking airline tickets and all of the different excess fees that pop up at the last minute. So there's still going to be some work to do in Washington.
And airlines were not included in the federal rules either, if I recall correctly, right?
There had been a DOT effort, a separate effort through the Department of Transportation, but not through the FTC.
Right.
According to a 2024 analysis by the Council of Economic Advisors, this is out of the Berkshire Eagle, junk fees, such as these fees that we're talking about, cost people an average of $650 a year. So it's definitely big money on the table. All right, well, I'm going to move us on to talk about bugs.
Yes.
We're talking about bugs. NEPM's Phil Bishop took a look at invasive bugs that continue to spread across Massachusetts, and it has landed here in Hampden County. I can attest to it. I've seen one at my house. It's a good news, bad news front. One invasive species is close to being eradicated, while another appears to be on the rise. Yes, the Asian longhorn beetle in Worcester appears to be on its way out, but fluttering, perhaps in a sky near you, is the spotted lantern fly. And if you haven't seen one of these, the body of it sort of looks like a bumblebee, and then they've got two-toned wings, tan with black spots and then red with black spots. They're rather fetching. They're interesting looking for sure. Phil Bishop reported on this, Liz, and while they're interesting to look at, they can really make a sticky, stinky mess.
Yeah,
right?
they're pretty dangerous. I mean, they're not going to kill off a tree or a plant, but they're going to weaken it. So the big issue is that for trees, specifically, it creates a sap that comes out. I'm not sure if it comes out of the body of the bug. I'm not a biologist, guys. Body of the bug or from the tree itself, but it essentially droops down and it gets into everything.
Do not park your car
it's
under
sticky. We know this because it's outside of our parking lot, which is how him and I started talking about this lantern bug anyway. But, in cities like Springfield, it seems like this bug tends to be in urban environments. They've worked so hard to get, to become a green city and to grow all these trees, to plant trees during Arbor Day. And if these trees are getting attacked by these bugs, they're essentially not... It's stunting their development, their growth. So you're getting these tiny trees that are just never going to grow because they're being attacked by this bug. So Springfield has really high asthma rates, and we need like that clean air. And so it's a bummer because they are beautiful bugs, and they're being advised, like as an individual, don't go stomp the bugs and kill them
I did
off.
not follow that. I saw one at my house. That's not fair. I asked my husband to stomp on it, and he did. But I did look on Google first. I took a picture of it and double checked that it was in fact a spotted lanternfly, which I think that's the MDAR guidance,
yes,
right?
It is.
They don't want you indiscriminately going out there and killing bugs that are helpful, but they have a whole range of information on the website, and we'll link to it in our show notes too, of how exactly you handle these things. It could involve scraping the egg sac off of a tree. It could involve vacuuming the larva or the adult bugs. I went way deep in the rabbit hole on how to eradicate these lanternflies because I talked with Phil yesterday, and he said the concern from MDAR is that they might not be able to eradicate them. Right. It might just be a process of controlling and hoping that they don't spread around. Paul, were you ever on the bug beat? I certainly, covering the Berkshires, got stuck with the bug beat a time or two.
I don't remember being on the bug beat, but I remember very well the Asian longhorn beetle infestation in Worcester County. Yeah. I remember them coming through my neighborhood and marking trees, and I'm thinking, oh no, they're going to tear these trees down. And tens of thousands of trees were taken out of the city of Worcester in an effort to eradicate the Asian longhorn beetle, which I guess they've pretty much done now.
Sam Turk in GBH News this week reporting that they look like all of the hard work they've put in the past decade
has right, at a cost, though, of tens of thousands of trees. Yeah. Now, the lanternfly apparently is not as destructive as Liz indicated. But I've also seen conflicting advice, because I went onto the website and I did a Google search, and I ended up on the Rhode Island Department of Environmental Management's website, and they do recommend that if you see one, stomp on it.
Is that Paul, you itching to go out there with your boots?
I have yet, as far as I can tell, I've not encountered one
You're
yet.
going to see one in the parking lot.
I've not encountered one yet. I'll go look around the parking lot later.
Now that's a dilemma. You might not be up for murder in Massachusetts or in Rhode Island rather, but you might be in Massachusetts if you squash a spotted lanternfly. I mean, I think the broader issue here is the impact these invasive species on the rise, hopefully on the decline for the Asian longhorn beetle. This is all tied to climate change, right? Mm-hmm. We're seeing more of these insects becoming more of a problem, and I think the onus is on us to really pay attention to all of these different things and take the environment and the way we treat it seriously. Anything you want to add to this, Eric Lesser?
There were two kind of little details. Again, I love the reporting and reading the stories because there's two great details. One was that I think one of the bugs lays 90 eggs. Oh. So good luck getting that under control. Yeah. And the second is, who knew that the state employed a professional tree climber?
Right.
No.
Who apparently hooks his iced coffee to his rig, so he climbs the tree and is able to
up and drink your coffee. I did think it was interesting in that Sam Turkin's story, the scientists or the people that were working on eradicating the beetle said, they're going to be out of a job. They've been doing this for 10 years. And I'm like, spotted lanternfly, like just take over this other bug, right?
That's a whole new subset of a job profession. You just follow invasive species and figure out where your place in the eradication chain fits. All right, I am going to pivot us now, Liz, from bugs to gambling.
Okay.
Karen Brown from New England Public Media took a look at this issue this week and potential gambling ills. Tell us more.
Yeah, so you can actually go on our website right now and see the entire series. It's a 3-part series looking at the effects of gambling on mental health and also looking at how different communities are dealing with it, so on a legislative level. So she went to Norway. She actually flew to Norway, and then she spent some time in the UK as well. Norway is like the dream situation, right? They have very strict regulations about how much people can gamble. They really monitor people's in terms of funding, how much money you're spending on it. They don't have flashy lights or ways that would get you that addictive feeling that you get from gambling and winning. The UK is a hot mess, basically. They just have no regulation. There's a lot of issues with it. She interviewed some people who came close to losing everything. One guy who almost committed suicide over a family of a son who did commit suicide because of his gambling addiction. It got so bad, and he just felt like he didn't have an out. And then now looking at Massachusetts, and specifically because of the casinos that we have here in the Gaming Commission, and then also looking at the U.S. and what regulations are coming our way, and if we can maybe have a balance between the two.
And the concern being that a lot of Massachusetts regulations looked at what was happening in the UK to build the gambling infrastructure that we have here.
Very compelling. So
I am being played off by our engineer, Bart Rankin. I want to thank our panel, Elizabeth Roman, Paul Tuthill, and Eric Lesser. You have been listening to The Rundown here on 88.5 NEPM. We're back from summer vacation. I'm Carrie Saldo. Have a great Friday.